which is why I'm honored to name Nathan Langford as our new Director of Traditional Industries. There was a heartbeat of silence, then thunderous applause. I searched the crowd, my eyes brushing past the cameras, past the suited executives, until they found him standing in the back, arms crossed just like always. My father. He didn't smile, not quite, but he nodded. That was enough. On the wall behind us hung a banner, "Building Smarter Futures Together." And in that moment, I wasn't the boy with the laptop anymore. I was the man who'd carved a new road forward and left enough room on it for the man who once said I'd never make it. The event was winding down. Caterers were collecting empty glasses. Team members were posing for photos. And somewhere behind me, the Horizon Analytics banner still fluttered faintly in the air-conditioned breeze. I stepped away from the chatter, toward the edge of the floor, where the old steel beams were still exposed, raw reminders of what this place used to be. My father stood there, hands in his pockets, surveying the crowd like a man watching a ship leave the harbor. We hadn't spoken since the announcement. He didn't look at me when he said, "You planned this all along." It wasn't accusatory, just a quiet truth. "I planned to build something that mattered," I replied. "The rest, it fell into place." He nodded once. I saw the trucks from Greenscape outside, men loading up, contracts being signed. I waited. Let him sit with it. "You know," he said after a pause, "for years I thought the world had turned soft, that working with your hands meant something, that breaking your back was the only honest way to build a life." He turned then, met my eyes, but maybe I just didn't want to admit that your way was building something too. I didn't say anything. Didn't need to. He looked toward the polished glass doors where Horizon's name was etched in clean, bold type. "Your name's not on the building," he said. "Neither was yours," I answered. That's when I saw it. Not pride, not even acceptance, but recognition. Builder to builder, architect to architect. No longer father to son, just two men who had carved their own paths through different storms. He reached into his jacket, pulled out the familiar key fob and placed it in my hand. "Sold the Ferrari," he said. "Didn't fit me anyway." "What did you do with the money?" "Put it into your company stock," he said. "Figured if I can't beat you, I might as well believe in you." Then, without waiting for applause or even acknowledgement, he walked past me and out the glass doors, and for the first time, I didn't need him to look back. 6 months later, the river behind our headquarters moved slow and steady, like it always had, like it always would. Inside, the hum of work echoed across wide hallways, keyboards tapping, quiet conversations in meeting rooms, interns rolling charts into pitch decks for clients that used to laugh us off. Horizon Analytics was no longer just a startup. It was a hub, a bridge between two worlds, old hands and new minds. I walked past the wall where we displayed our core values framed in clean wood. Underneath the usual words like integrity, accessibility, and resilience, there was one new plaque. It had been my father's suggestion during one of our weekly check-ins. I hadn't expected it, but I didn't question it either. It read, "Remember whose shoulders you stand on." Beneath it was an old photo, black and white, scanned from a crumpled original. My father at 20 standing next to his first landscaping truck, dirt under his nails, sweat on his brow, pride in his posture. Every week since the launch, he brought someone new to the office, an electrician, a plumber, a retired roofer. All men who'd given their best years to the grindstone and found themselves edged out by algorithms and automation. "They don't need handouts," he told me, once sipping coffee at the bar we'd installed near reception. "They need dignity and tools that make sense." And so we built those tools. We gave ownership to employees, created training programs to help old tradesmen pivot, reinvested in Charleston, brought students home after graduation instead of losing them to cities they didn't love. Mom had retired early. She sent me pictures from Italy, hiking trails in the Dolomites with Dad, who'd finally taken a cooking class, apparently, and learned to make pasta from scratch. He was smiling in the photos. So was she. Thomas ran marketing now. Evan was our COO. We'd gone from 2 laptops in a college dorm to an ecosystem that fed hundreds of families. And still it felt like we were just getting started. As I stepped into my office overlooking the river, the sun catching on the water like gold on glass, I realized something. This wasn't revenge. This was restoration. I didn't win against my father. I won with him, and that's what made it real. By 11:30, I had 3 names. By lunch, I was on a video call with the owner of Greenscape Enterprises, Harold Jenkins. He was blunt, curious, and the kind of man who respected efficiency. We've had our eye on Langford Landscaping. For years, he admitted. Loyal client base, strong region coverage, but Nathan won't return our calls. What if I could make him listen? I asked. That got his attention. By 4, I had an offer in writing. $1.2 million to acquire Langford Landscaping, keep the employees, and bring my father on as a regional manager with full benefits and a 5-year employment contract. It was generous, more generous than it had to be. That was the point. Simultaneously, I signed the lease on a 15,000-square-foot warehouse near the old train depot. Charleston would be the new headquarters of Horizon Analytics. I wanted my people close. I wanted my work here, where I could see the past I came from and the future I was building. The moves were quiet. No announcements, no declarations, just clean, deliberate steps. This wasn't about proving I was better than him. It was about making. Sure, neither of us had to lose to win. It was redemption, written in contracts instead of apologies. I didn't call ahead. I just showed up. The Langford Landscaping office hadn't changed in years. Same clunky file cabinets, same ticking clock above the door, same faint scent of diesel and cheap coffee lingering in the air. My father was behind his desk, hunched, over receipts like he was still trying to muscle order out of chaos. He looked up, startled, then annoyed. "So you decided to grace me with your presence," he said, voice clipped. After standing me up for dinner, I walked in and placed the folder on his desk, spine facing him. "This is more important than dinner." He didn't touch it. "Let me guess, your big idea to fix everything, your tech genius solution?" "No," I said quietly. "It's an acquisition offer." That made him blink. "From Greenscape Enterprises," I continued. "They'll buy the business for $1.2 million. Every employee stays. Better health care. You stay on as regional manager. 5-year contract, full benefits, profit sharing." He didn't reach for the folder. His hands curled into fists on the desk. "You went behind my back," he said, the tremble in his voice barely hidden. "You had no right." "I didn't go behind you," I said, holding his gaze. "I went ahead, because the business is failing and you won't admit it." He stood up. "You think you know everything because you made one deal? You think you can just roll in here with your Wall Street money and buy out the work of my life?" "No," I said. "I'm not buying. I'm trying to save it." He was shaking now, hands planted on the desk. "Get out." I reached into my jacket and pulled out a single key. I placed it gently beside the folder. "What's this supposed to be?" "The key to the Ferrari," I said. "It's yours, not charity. Consider it an advance." Then I turned to leave. "The offer expires in 48 hours," I said without looking back. "After that, Greenscape talks to your competitors." I opened the door, then paused. "Think about your crew. Think about Mom." And then I walked out. 2 months later, I stood under soft lights on a makeshift stage inside our newly renovated headquarters, an old warehouse with brick bones and a steel soul, now pulsing with glass, cables, and ambition. Horizon Analytics was no longer a name on a pitch deck. It was real, alive, buzzing with engineers, designers, strategists, many of them local, many of them first-generation professionals like me. Rows of folding chairs stretched before me, filled with journalists, investors, local business owners, and the families of those who helped build this thing. I cleared my throat and stepped up to the mic. "Today, Horizon Analytics officially launches our Charleston headquarters," I said. "Our mission is simple: to bring Wall Street-level tools to Main Street entrepreneurs, to bridge the gap between tradition and innovation." I let the words settle. Then I shifted gears. But this isn't just a tech company story. It's a Charleston story. A story about honoring where we come from while building what's next. The screen behind me lit up. A photo of the Langford Landscaping logo slowly dissolving into the sleek branding of Greenscape Regional Holdings. We're proud to announce a $2 million investment into Greenscape Regional Holdings, now the parent company of several legacy service businesses in the Southeast, the crowd murmured. My voice steadied. And as part of this partnership, we're launching a pilot program to bring smart analytics into traditional trades, starting with landscaping, a high. Pause. For the first time in my life, my father didn't have a comeback, and he couldn't look me in the eye. That silence, that hesitation, it said more than any insult ever could. The ground had shifted, and this time, I was the one holding the center. The smell of charcoal and smoked meat clung to the air, thick as tension. I stood in the shade of the awning, watching my father laugh too loud at a story he wasn't really listening to. He flipped burgers with mechanical ease, nodding at the right beats. But I could see it. His eyes weren't in it. They were darting. Calculating, avoiding. I waited until the crowd thinned by the grill, then stepped up beside him. "Dad," I said quietly, "can we talk for a minute?" He didn't look at me, just stabbed at a patty and said, "We're talking. You hungry? Grab a bun." "I'm serious. It's about the company." He waved me off. "Not here, son. People are eating. Nobody wants to talk business." But 5 minutes later, I watched him chat with a client about a mulch supplier like it was the key to world peace. When my Uncle Frank asked me about the Wall Street Journal article, I barely got out a sentence before. My dad cut in. "Don't believe everything you read, Frank. You know how the media is. They'll make a lemonade stand sound like a global empire." Everyone laughed. My chest tightened. Later, when I tried again, this time by the cooler, he suddenly remembered he needed to refill ice. I offered to help. He waved me off. By sunset, I'd lost count of how many times he'd dodged me, or how many conversations he redirected to lawn care, leaf blowers, and contracts I couldn't care less about. But what gutted me wasn't the avoidance. It was the fear. He wasn't just ignoring my success. He was shielding himself from it, like if he never acknowledged it, it wouldn't be real. That if he pretended hard enough, I'd stay the boy with the laptop who never finished what he started. I stood near the back steps, soda can sweating, in my hand, and watched him pose for pictures with employees in their green company polos. He was proud of that business. He'd built it with his hands, his spine, his sweat, but he couldn't look at what I built, and I finally understood. I wasn't trying to earn his pride anymore. I was outgrowing it. The kitchen smelled like coffee and lemon soap when I walked in. My mother was at the sink, her hands moving rhythmically, washing dishes she'd already dried twice. I sat down at the table, not speaking yet. The silence felt thicker than it should have. She turned slowly, drying her hands again on a towel. "That didn't need drying. He's proud of you," she said before I could say a word. "He just doesn't know how to show it." I leaned forward, elbows on the table. "Mom, is everything okay with the business?" She froze for a second too long. Her eyes dropped to the towel still clutched in her hands. Then she sat across from me, her voice barely louder than a whisper. "No, it's not." My heart didn't race. It slowed. "He won't talk about it," she continued. "But I see the bills. I see the missed payments, the new landscaping chains. They undercut his prices. They hire cheap labor, offer app-based booking and guarantees he can't match. He's losing clients, slowly but steadily," I swallowed. "Has he said anything?" She shook her head. "He can't, not to anyone. But 3 years ago, he remortgaged the house, put everything he had into new trucks, new equipment, trying to modernize. It didn't work. And now?" Her voice trailed off. She didn't need to finish. It landed like a blow to the chest. The man who'd laughed at me for dropping out, for risking everything on a startup, had been gambling with his own future in silence. While I was pitching investors, he was pitching mulch and praying the invoices cleared. My mind flashed to the stacks of paperwork in his office, to the tension in his shoulders at the grill, to the way he looked at my car like it was mocking. He didn't just resent me, he was drowning. And for the first time, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt cold, hollow. He was falling apart behind the curtain of pride, and somehow I'd become the mirror he couldn't afford to look into. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was angry. I'd already passed that cliff and looked over the edge. This was something else. A steady, almost mechanical clarity. By morning, I had a plan. Not one built to shame him or knock him off his pedestal. I didn't need that anymore. What I needed was to make sure his life's work didn't end in foreclosure papers and silent humiliation. He'd never ask for help. So I had to make it look like something else, like business. I called Patricia at Blackwater just after sunrise. Her voice was groggy, but her mind sharpened the second I laid out what I was after. I need profiles on local landscaping companies in Charleston, I said. The big ones, the ones hungry for expansion, and I need it by noon. I dried my hands, thanked my mom for dinner, and drove back to my apartment. I remember the way the porch light flickered when I stepped outside. The air was sticky, and the hum of cicadas filled the silence my family had left in my chest. Back in my apartment, I opened my laptop and stared at the contract that had been sitting in my inbox for hours. It was from Blackwater Capital, one of the largest hedge funds on the East Coast. They wanted exclusive rights to my predictive trading algorithm. 8 figures, licensing, advisory, options. Everything I'd worked for was in those pages, and all I could hear in my head was my father's voice, laughing. I didn't sign it right away. I reread every clause, every fine print note, every obligation. Then I signed it in silence. No celebration, no champagne. Just a boy his father had already written off, finalizing a deal that would change his life, alone, in the glow of a laptop screen. The distance between us wasn't just emotional now. It was fact, documented, enforceable, and irreversible. The night I signed the Blackwater deal, there were no fireworks, no popping champagne, no velvet ropes or rooftop parties. Just Thomas, my roommate, heating up leftover pizza and handing me a beer like it was any other Tuesday. He didn't make a big deal out of it. That was his gift, treating me the same, whether I had $14 or $14 million in the bank. We sat on the floor because the couch was lopsided, and the coffee table was a hand-me-down from a Craigslist free section. The only celebration was a box of cheap paper plates and 2 slices of half-cold pepperoni, the way it had always been. "Congratulations, man," Thomas said, raising his bottle toward me. "Just don't forget us little people when you're running Wall Street." I laughed quietly. My heart wasn't loud that night, it was full but heavy. After he went to bed, I stepped out onto the balcony and pulled out my phone. There was only one person I needed to call. When my mom picked up, I could hear the TV in the background, one of her detective shows playing low. "Joshua," she said, voice small. "I did it, Mom," I whispered. The deal went through. Silence. Then, a soft gasp, and then the quietest sob I'd ever heard. "Oh, baby," she said through tears. "I knew you would. I knew it." I leaned against the railing, letting the night air wash over me. She didn't ask for numbers, didn't press for details, just kept saying she was proud, just kept crying. The kind of crying that sounds like relief, like years of held breath finally let go. I didn't call my dad. I thought about it. Thumb hovered over his contact. But I knew exactly what he'd say. Something about luck, about timing, about how nothing on a screen could compare to sweating through a 12-hour shift. So I slid the phone back in my pocket and stared up at the sky. I was seen. Maybe not by him, but finally, deeply, by myself. And that night I realized something I hadn't let myself admit before. It was time to go home. The tires whispered against the gravel as I pulled into my parents' driveway. The sun was high, casting long shadows across the lawn where folding chairs and coolers lined the backyard. I could already hear the crackle of the grill, the hum of casual conversation, the sharp metallic clang of beer bottles tapping together. I parked beside my father's old F-150. Still polished, still proud, the same truck he'd owned since I was in middle school. The Ferrari's engine let out a low, throaty purr before I shut it off. For a moment, there was stillness. Then heads turned. Silence rolled out across the backyard like a thundercloud. Plastic forks hovered mid-air, words cut off mid-sentence. My mother froze, a bowl of potato salad in her hands. My cousin Evan's eyes went wide, and then my father, standing at the grill in a faded apron, spatula in one hand, beer in the other. The same stance I'd seen since childhood, like he was master of the ceremony and the smoke was his crown. He smirked. "Well, look who decided to join us," he called out. "Whose car did you borrow to make that entrance, son?" Scattered. Laughter followed, the kind that feels more like obligation than joy. I stepped out, button down crisp, sleeves rolled just enough to show I'd worked for this. I said nothing. Just walked across the yard, eyes forward, the heat of the afternoon rising through my shoes. I pulled the title from my pocket and held it out. He took it, unfolded it slowly. His eyes skimmed the page. Name, VIN, purchase date, paid in full. The T. Corners of his mouth twitched. Then he folded the paper neatly and handed it back. "Must be nice to have rich friends," he muttered, voice flat. "Grab a plate. Your mother made deviled eggs." But the mask had slipped. Pathetic boy. You never had a head for success. That sentence never really left me. It was carved into my memory like initials scratched into a tree trunk. My father said it 3 years ago, and yet I could still hear it, clear as the day. He muttered it under his breath at a family dinner right in front of my cousins. This morning, that same pathetic boy was featured in the Wall Street Journal. Full-page spread. My name, Joshua Langford, printed in bold black ink beneath the headline. 23-year-old dropout inks $14 million deal with Blackwater Capital. I should have felt something. Vindication, maybe. Pride. But all I felt was stillness. Like the part of me that had been sprinting for years had finally collapsed, and the silence was deafening. I stood in my kitchen, still barefoot, holding a mug of untouched coffee that had long gone cold. The article was open on my laptop, my face, my story. Every quote was accurate. Every number was real. It wasn't a dream. I'd made it. And yet, I kept thinking about the day my father said it. We were sitting outside on the back porch. Mosquitoes, dancing in the porch light. I was talking about financial modeling and how algorithms could change the way people invested. He shook his head slowly, lips pressed in that tight line that always meant he was preparing a verbal punch. "Pathetic boy," he muttered, just loud enough. "Not built for real work. That boy couldn't sell water in a desert." I didn't say anything, just nodded, got up, and quietly carried the dishes inside. But that night something shifted in me, not rage, something colder, a silent agreement with myself. I would succeed, not for praise, not even for peace, just to prove, beyond a shadow of doubt, that I was never the pathetic one. Now, as I looked at my phone and saw missed calls from investors, emails from journalists, texts from people who once laughed when I said I wanted to change the world, I didn't smile. I just opened the door to my apartment, stepped into the hallway, and knew exactly where I needed to go next. Charleston summers hit like a furnace, the kind of heat that clung to your skin, soaked your shirt, and made you feel like the sun had a personal grudge. My father thrived in it. He wore his tan lines like medals, arms burned to a deep bronze, neck always a shade redder than the day before. He believed in sweat, callouses, shovels in dirt, and boots on gravel. That was success to him. I was 14 the first time I told him I wanted to study finance. He laughed, loud and open-mouthed, like I'd said I wanted to become a magician. "Finance?" he said between chuckles. "You mean sitting around, counting other people's money?" Then came the kicker. Lazy boy's dream. I said nothing. Just stood there in the garage while he loaded mulch bags onto the back of the truck. He didn't look at me again. Just tossed the last sack, clapped his hands clean, and muttered, "Pathetic." That night, I opened my second-hand laptop and Googled, "How do algorithms work?" I didn't understand a word of the first article I read, but I kept going. Every night, While my dad was watching sports in the living room or passed out from a long day, I sat at my desk trying to teach myself what he thought was useless. By 16, I was building simple trading models, clumsy things that barely worked, but thrilled me more than anything I'd ever felt planting hedges in someone's front yard. My room became a cave of code and coffee-stained notebooks. He'd poke his head in sometimes, shake his head, and say things like, "Still playing on that toy?" Or, "Maybe if you spent half that time learning to fix a mower, you'd be useful." I didn't answer. I just kept typing. By the time I left for college, I'd built a prototype that could analyze financial news sentiment in real time. No one knew. Not my friends, not my dad, not even my mom. I wasn't the boy with the shovel. I was the boy with the laptop, and I was going to dig my own way out. The clink of silverware and the smell of overcooked brisket filled the dining room. My mother was fussing over the sweet tea pitcher. Aunt Carol was going on about her latest bunco night. And my dad, well, my dad was holding court at the far end of the table like he always did. Big gestures, big voice, big presence. He thrived on the spotlight. I was clearing my plate when I heard him say it. "Mark my words, he'll be back mowing lawns by summer," he said, laughing loud enough to shake the salt shaker. That boy couldn't sell water in a desert. The laughter that followed wasn't cruel, it was casual, comfortable, like they'd all heard the joke before and found it funnier each time. I stood frozen by the sink, the plate in my hand suddenly feeling heavier than it should have. My cousin Evan gave me a quick glance, a flicker of something, maybe sympathy, maybe pity, before looking away. I didn't say a word.